All right, what's going on, my money mavens and moolah misfits? It's me, Joe Knows Money, and I'm sitting here with.
Brandy knows money.
So this is my wife, right? So oftentimes you hear about my story where we talk about at the age of 40, I decided to retire after 20 years as a financial advisor in order to slow travel the world with my wife, my two kids, as well as my mom. So we thought it'd be important and fun for us to get together and actually share our combined experience, right? And how we get to retire at age 38, because I was 40, my wife was 35. Do the average. That's how we say we retired at 38 together. And we get a lot of questions, right? And be perfectly honest, we've been busy just living life. And so we got a ton of knowledge, a ton of footage. We just haven't had an opportunity to put it all out. So we said, what's better than to do a live where we could address the questions that we get most often, take on some additional questions in our Q&A, and just have some fun with it.
Right. It's been a minute. So those who I haven't seen in a while, I miss you. I love you. Thank you guys for sending us love and well wishes and all that good stuff. So I'm just grateful to be a part of this whole live situation, to be here with Joe Knows Money.
All
It's
right.
very rare that I surface,
Hey.
but I'm glad to be here. So.
Well, I'm glad to have you here too. So let's talk about it a little bit, right? So, the title of this video is how did we get here, essentially, and then how are we currently doing it, and then what's going to happen from here, essentially.
Yeah,
right?
we've had quite a few people reach out to us with questions. So today we're just going to go through some of those questions, and hopefully those questions are some of the questions you have. And if they're not, just go ahead and drop them in the comments. Let's share, let's build, because we want as many people as possible to experience what we're experiencing.
Yeah, because the information that we got is hard fought, right? There's not a lot of people that we could reach out to, certainly not personally, but then even doing our research that had a similar situation as ours, traveling with two young kids and figuring out homeschooling and that, all the logistics part of it. So why don't we just dive right in?
Let's do it.
All right. So one of the biggest questions that we get is what inspired your decision to move abroad?
You go first.
All right, so check this out. It's interesting because it seemed like it was all of a sudden on one hand, but it's also been like years in the making on another. Because I've always had this kind of dual push pull when it came to myself personally, where I wanted to do extremely well, successful financially, and all of those things on one hand. But on the other hand, I always had this kind of pull that I just wanted to sit down somewhere, enjoy my life, and get out of the rat race and the hustle and bustle. And it wasn't until I found what I call my tribe, which was the Financial Independence Retire Early community, that I finally felt at home. I was like, man, this is it, right? You run as fast as you can for the shortest period of time, and then you quit, right? Then you decide to retire and essentially have more years living your life than you do working and on the hamster wheel, if you will, right? So that's one of the things that initially attracted me to the financial independence retire early movement. But far before that, Brandy and I were already doing the things that were associated with retiring early. We just didn't have the language, if you will, right? So we were saving over 60% of our income. We knew that we were building a business so that at any point in time, whether it be because voluntary reasons or maybe involuntary, meaning maybe we got a bad manager or maybe the company culture changed and we're like, man, this is no longer a place that we want to be. We were building a business on the side, right? To make sure that we could always hop off of one train and hop on the other. So everything came to a head around the beginning of 2020, right? So we have been talking about it for a while, and a number of things happened, right? Naturally, we have been dealing with social injustice for a long time, and that has been weighing, I know, just not on Brandy and I, but on the community as a whole, and just really thinking, what's the best environment to raise our kids? What's the best environment for us, for our safety, for our not only our physical safety, but our mental well-being as well. So that had a lot to do with it. Also, I remember something that was near and dear to me was, unfortunately, the passing of Kobe Bryant. And the reason for that is because not only the inspiration that he was, but I started listening to the tributes that were pouring in. And I remember a tribute that came from Shaquille O'Neal, a fraternity brother of mine. And he was just talking about, I'm paraphrasing, in which Kobe was like super busy, but he always found time to reach out to Shaq kids, reach out to other people. He kept connections alive. And Shaq was saying that, everyone knows I have dozens of jobs and I have all of these investments and I'm super busy. And he was just admitting that he could have been a better friend, right? He could have been a better father and a better, in terms of involvement. And when I was thinking about my life, I was thinking like, how does mine shape up and how does it compare to that, right? Because I was thinking, I'm sure Shaq kids love the fact that maybe he's trying to become a billionaire, but at the same time, if you were to ask them, which would they want? Their dad to be more involved in the present or to leave them $1 billion 40 years from now? I would think that it's probably, having him in their life and being present right now. So for me, I thought about how that pertained to my life and how I wanted to be involved in my kids and my family and my friends and have more time versus spending it working and, all of my time being taken up elsewhere when my real goal was to always get back to my family.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, just the freedom, we aren't necessarily trained or conditioned as youngsters to aspire to be retired. You're really trained to go to school, get a job, work that job for so many years, and if you're lucky, you get a gold watch at the end of that rainbow. And so this idea of retiring early just seemed ridiculous, really. And so what inspired me, along with all the things you said, was just freedom, energy, not having to go to a place and force myself to enjoy it and to take the frustrations of others on as mine and, have to, continue to reset my energy so that I stay at a high frequency. But really, it's an endless pit of, everybody else's, energy that mixes in there, just, eats you up. So there's so many things. So when we had an opportunity, I was like, let's go, because there's a lot of unknowns. But what I do know is that if it's better than just spending time and energy into places that are not going to give you a decent return, then I'd rather just gamble with it. So we had everything we needed, and most importantly, we had each other to bounce ideas off of and just, push and go for it. So
yeah, I mean, that's important, right? So even though we had separate motivations and they were actually the same, to your point, I mean, freedom has always been the overarching theme, right? And then all the other things added to that, right? So the question I have is,
oh God, here we go.
were either of you hesitant in making this transition to retire?
Okay, y'all, guess who was hesitant? Any guesses on who might be? Okay, yeah, I was a bit hesitant about the whole thing. You have to think, we had 2 children under 5. I just had a baby last year, so I was pregnant while we were.
Good wife.
All right. So there were so many reasons for me to be hesitant. How are we going to care for them? From formula to diapers to water to living situations to schooling, everything. This is the first 5 years, so you have to have all these things buttoned up. I'm supposed to be superstar mom. I'm supposed to have it all lined up. I got to have the school ready. I got to have this ready. When you're talking about living in a whole nother country that I haven't even been to, so I'm not privy to any of the ways of life. Are they going to have all the things we need as a young family to build and to mold and do all those things? And then one day I just said, you know what? Let me let all that go, because there's a lot of unknowns here in my controlled environment as well, So let me relax and let me try to be creative, because creativity is one of the gifts God has given me, thankfully.
True.
And thank you. Just wait and see who's going to agree. But just be creative in this space of openness and say, okay, can I do it? And if the answer is yes, I can, then let's see what we can do.
And then a good point. And I think also, how can we do it? Right? Because one of the things I always used to share with clients, as well as just family members and friends when they seek advice, is, ask yourself not only, can we do this? Is it possible? Because that sets you up for an easy yes or no answer. And oftentimes we just say no and then move on with our life. Continue just moving on that people mover, right? Going to the next promotion, to the next job, to the next this, to the next that, and not really give it a full thought, right? So if you can ask yourself, instead of can we do it, say how can we do it? Because what that does is set your mind up like a Google search engine, where now you're looking for ways to say, okay, if we did move forward with this, this is one path. Here's another. Here's another. And then from there, you can decide, is this ultimately something we want to do or not? But at least you've given it full thought. So then that way you don't have the regrets in the future of saying, man, 5 years ago it crossed my mind, but I just kind of, threw it to the side, when you know that it was something deep inside of you that was yearning for maybe something more, like freedom.
There's a word, y'all. That's the word. I'm telling you, that is our word, freedom. So yeah, I agree. And I think, yes, there's some hesitation, and rightfully so, because it is a very big change, but it's so worth considering.
Yeah. And I think, along with that is, give each other grace, right? Because naturally I had thought about it. I was, financial planner of 20 years. So I had the numbers down pat, like, here's what it looks like. But none of what Brandy just mentioned really had to do with the numbers. It had to do more with the logistics of everything, right? Like, how are we going to do it? What is that going to look like? So,
and the comfort of knowing, my way around our hometown, right? And knowing how to get here and get there. So when if it's just you and I, it's easy for us to pick up, pack a bag, and move somewhere else. With the children, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Am I being fair to them by moving around and relocating and doing all that? But then we realize as a team, communication is key. Include the kids in the communication, and they are resilient. They roll. Our kids literally just are awesome. I'm not just saying that because they're ours, but they really just pick up and go. As you can see from our videos, and you'll see more of them, they're resilient. So kids will adjust, and it's okay if you're a little hesitant.
Yeah, because you have to work through it. Because look, if we're being honest, it's not just your thoughts, but it's maybe your friends' thoughts have creeped in there, your family member friends, and it could be very well intentioned. But if you think of when you think to yourself, you say, how many other people do I know that have retired early? And you always have to consider the source whenever you're talking to somebody, particularly about something that is, revolutionary, right? Where people are like, oh my gosh, family members, particularly older ones, are like, well, I had to work 40, 50 years. How can you do this? And, other people, including ourselves, have just been conditioned to, like Brandy said, get out of school, work 40, 50 years, and then you retire. How dare you think you can retire before 40? Right? But it's definitely possible.
It is.
All right. So let's talk about the next question that we get from people, which is, what are the mechanics of planning to move your family overseas? You want to take that one?
Well, I'll start. I know you have the heavy lifting there, but mechanics, I just named some, schooling, running water. Some people have asked if we have running water. Lodging, where are we going to live? Transportation, insurance, medical coverage, self-care, right? Ladies, we like to get our nails done, our hair done. Where are we going to do that at? I'm used to going to my barber for 30 years. And, some of the other mechanics of travel, what are the, travel options to the destination that you picked? If you have assets back home like we do, we have properties, we've got businesses that need to run. We've got a little 5-year-old giggling in the back. All those mechanics have to be worked out before we can just take off. So what did we do to get ready to leave? And I have to shout out Atlanta, because Atlanta is our hub, our home.
Yeah. Much love to
It's
Atlanta.
hard to leave Atlanta because Atlanta is just so beautiful, so black, and so luscious. You just love it. But What did we have to do to get out the door?
All right, so you said a couple of important things. So I'm going to talk about the mechanics, but one of the things that dawned upon me was mindset, right? So when you think about the mindset, right? You have said a number of things in terms of like running water and things of that nature, right? So here's what I found to be important because as I shared with you all, it was a maturation process. So I was fortunate enough to work with clients as a wealth management advisor who are from all different places around the world. And it dawned on me when I was thinking, because I had true friendships with my clients, so we could talk freely with each other. And as I started thinking about some of the questions that I wanted to ask them if they were from different parts of the world, it would be like, hey, what is it safe? Is it high crime? What's the government like? What's the water like? All of these things. But and then it dawned on me, like, in comparison to what, right? Brandy and I live in Sandy Springs, very safe. We feel good there, diverse community, all of that wonderful stuff. But if you go 20 minutes away to the bluff, or some other place, you may not feel that same vibe and that same energy, and that is true in a lot of different countries, right? So
shout out to the bluff.
Yeah, no, I ain't trying.
We're not gonna be calling out.
No, that's true. I shouldn't be calling out neighborhoods. Look, everybody know I'm from Milwaukee, so
Right.
I mean, you can Google it and see how we look in there. But the point is, it's just like if you go to a different part of the city, and you may have love for it, but you may feel a little bit less safe. And my point is, if you're in a different country, there may be safer parts and not as safe parts. That's my whole point, right?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct. And then when I started thinking about, like, all right, well, is the water drinkable? Very good question to ask, but don't use it as if the United States have pristine water supply everywhere. Look at Flint, Michigan. Look at 130 odd cities that have lead pipes that are nearly 100 years old. When we think about the stability of the government, and why are we asking these questions? Because we're not just tourists. When we're staying at destinations for 3 months or longer, we're travelers, right? We're immersing ourselves in it. So it's not like we're just going to go on a resort for a week, right?
Right.
And then lastly, when we're asking about how's the government, how's this, it's like, how is our government, right? And so my point is the mindset has to be right in terms of what you're comparing it to, for you to even have the notion that you can survive and thrive in a different country.
Facts.
Right? And then we get to the mechanics of it all. So let me tell you, it was a lesson learned. I had to do a ton of research. Let me give you an example, right? So first off, you have to plan out, let's just take the travel part of it, right? So you have to plan your flights. Well, I'm the family travel planner, right? I'm the travel agent. And so I was trying to plan a flight from Atlanta to Mazatlan, Mexico, and there's no direct flights. And the flight that you can get that's even connecting was about $1,200 to $1,400, which is a lot of money, particularly going to Mexico. It's normally not that high, right? So that would be, let's call it $1,400 for me, for you, for our 5-year-old, and for my mom, right? That's just the flight alone.
Right.
So what I decided to do instead, I said, hey, we're in no rush to get there. How can I make this more economical? Well, we signed up a while ago for a Southwest card. And first we had to spend a certain amount of money in order to get a certain number of points to get free mileage. But then I attach the cards to our business, and then I take the extra steps. Sometimes I have to call in to pay for a bill with the credit card, all in hopes of doing two things. One is building more points so we can get free flights in the future. But then two, if you get a certain number of points, then your companion flies for free, right? So we were able to achieve that, and we booked a flight from Atlanta to LA, in which I paid for my flight with points, my daughter's flight with points, my mom's flight with points. My wife was companion fly free, and then our 5-month-old, because he's under 2, was a lap child that flew for free.
Ooh, did y'all hear that?
For free, right?
Free. So we really flew
for free.
For free, just with a little tweaking, a little creativity on the financial part of just ordering the credit card and paying our bills through that credit card.
Exactly. It was that simple, right? Because they bank on people not paying their bills on time. So if you're one of the people that does, then you can really benefit from these offers that they provide.
Yes.
So that was from Atlanta to LA, and then we took Alaska Airlines from LA to Mazatlan. So I say Alaska Airlines on purpose because a lot of people are like, wow, Alaska Airlines would go to Mazatlan, right? Again, I did my research. I used Google Flights, and I was able to find the best value, and it was like $200 per person,
Nice.
right? So all in all, we got there, an entire family, for under $1,000. Yes, we did have a stayover in Los Angeles, but we have points from our Marriott rewards account, and we were able to pay for that with points as well.
So the main thing is, if you're traveling for work, or if you travel quite a bit with your family and friends, go ahead and figure out ways to, and a lot of people already do this, right? They generate points and they use those points and redeem those points. But if you can, go ahead and rack up, because what you save on the flight, you can splurge, especially in Mexico and places like that.
Man,
You
we're
can
going to talk about that. Yes,
on the other
indeed.
side of it. So yeah, go ahead and save that money.
Yeah, so save that money. So that was the flight logistics. And then we also had to set up the Airbnb,
Yes.
right? So we're setting these places up for months on end, right? So again, it's not like if you get in an Airbnb and it's a bad scenario for a week or 4 or 5 days, but we're traveling at the time with a 5-month-old. So it's very important that we get the accommodations right. And that entails a couple of things, just plugging in your dates, making sure there's available properties, but then making sure you look through the reviews. Don't take the lazy way out by just looking at the score, right? It may say 4.9 out of 5, and you're like, perfect. But what if in the last month, a neighbor moved in next door and their dogs bark all through the night? I mean, think about that. We wouldn't be able to sleep for a month or two at a particular destination, right? So just making sure that you have that figured out, and you get a discount for if you go longer than a month. So make sure you do that too. So you may be looking and saying, oh, this is $100 a night times 30. That's $3,000 a month. That's way too expensive. But if you put it in for your desired time frame, that normal $3,000 place may be more like $1,200.
Right.
Right.
And that's facts.
Yeah. True story.
Yes,
all
true
right.
story.
So what else?
Check the reviews,
Yeah.
and then read them. Read the reviews of how responsive is the Airbnb host. A lot of people say,
Yes.
oh, this person was very responsive when I had this issue or that issue. That goes a long way, especially if you're staying somewhere for an extended period of time.
True. And then where we get the Airbnb, right? Because oftentimes when you're traveling to a destination, you need to determine if you need a rental car or not.
Yeah.
For us, that's a very costly proposition because we're traveling with 3 adults and 2 children. 2 of the children need car seats, right? So, and if you looked at the rental car market lately, that can tally up to be more than your Airbnb itself.
Yeah.
So we'd rather spend a few more bucks to get closer to our actual destination. Like if we want to be close to the beach, we'll pay that extra money because we'll do the math to say we could save money at an Airbnb that's 10 miles away, but have to rent a car, and we'll combine that cost and say, oh, it's just cheaper if we pay more to stay on the beach or somewhere close to it.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have Airbnb. We've got a big one, which is medical coverage, insurance.
Oh, yeah. So check this out. So imagine this. We just told you we made it to Mexico for under $1,000 for our flight, right? And then I look up travel insurance and they want $500 to cover our trip, right? I'm like, $500 for what, right? But as I started to do the research and look to see, okay, if something happens to us medically, does our health insurance cover us? Right? So we have health insurance in the United States, but does that extend to Mexico? And the answer was no. So we had to make sure that our travel policy consisted of a medical coverage component. And then what if, because we're traveling in a time of COVID, what if someone got COVID and needed to get medevaced back to the United States for some advanced treatment? That alone could cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we wanted to make sure that coverage was in the policy. And then last but not least, and we used Insure My Trip. That seems to work out pretty good for us. But we—
Is that a website?
Yeah.
InsureMyTrip.com.
You got it. Yeah. So So, and then the reason why they worked out so well is because we had to, well, side note, a lot of credit cards, people don't know this little known fact, a lot of credit cards actually have trip insurance attached to it. You just have to call them to understand if yours does. But that didn't help us because we needed to make sure that if our businesses required us to be in Atlanta or required us to come off the road to come back to Atlanta, that it covered that as well. And there were only a few companies that would cover trip interruption or trip cancellation due to work or business. All right.
Very important because, yeah.
So two more things, and then we'll move on from that. The other two things to mention is, which caught me by surprise, by the way. Normally, when you leave your home, you're like, oh, no big deal. I'm just leaving for a week or two at most. I mean, maybe you would think to turn your AC up a little bit so it doesn't run your bill up. But other than that, that's all you have to do. But when you're going to be gone for months, there's a number of things you need to do. One, we had to make arrangements to make sure that our plumbing was ran every 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, to make sure we didn't experience rot in the pipes. We had to also make sure that our cars were driven because we still have cars because even though we sold our home, which we didn't talk about, we kept an investment property so that when we come back and we stay for a week or two between our major trips, that we still have transportation and things of that nature, right? But you still have to have your cars driven every 2 to 3 weeks because if you don't, you can have rodents that take up shop in your vehicle because it never moves. You could experience rotting of your tires or your engine rust, all of these kind of things that I was like, wow, right? You normally don't think about that, and we had to, and now we do before we head back out of the country.
Right.
Yeah, so
good mechanics, deal. Y'all roll your sleeve up. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's just, you're gonna be creative, work with your partner, or if you're single, really just consolidating everything down to where it makes sense.
Yeah, and good point. Yeah, we never said it was easy or it didn't take work, but what I will say is that when you think of it this way, think about the amount of effort it takes for you to plan your normal vacation, a few days, a few weeks, or whatever the case might be. Now multiply that times 52. Yeah. Right? I mean, because you're literally taking a year-round vacation, which is a great thing. So yes, we're not complaining. It just takes some additional work.
Facts.
All right. So what's another question that we often
Another question is, how did you know you were financially ready to retire and to move abroad?
That's pretty easy. I actually did a video called How to Calculate Your FIRE number. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And then once you achieve that number, you're essentially free, right?
And depending on where you choose to live, the cost of living might be hopefully less than what is required of where you're currently at. So then you can kind of, do the averages of wherever you're going, because you might end up saving a little extra money or spending more, just depending on where you pick. So
yeah, and to that point, right? So when you're calculating your FIRE number, you're coming up with your anticipated retirement expenses, right? And so part of that, like Brandy said, is, are you anticipating your retirement expenses based upon where you currently live or where you anticipate living in the future? We wanted to make sure that even though we're going to be in some low cost travel destinations sometimes, we wanted to make sure that we are never priced out of being in Atlanta, right? So we based everything off of, hey, if we didn't leave Atlanta, are we still okay to retire? And then obviously we get more bang for the buck when we go to places like Mexico, right?
And where we currently are.
Exactly. You want to tell them that now or later?
Oh, wait.
All right, cool. So did you want to tell them anything about like Mexico and the cost of living, or you want to?
Sure, real briefly. In Mazatlan, Mexico, which we recently visited, the cost of food, entertainment, and we didn't have transportation, but lodging and everything came well under what we spend in Atlanta. We were able to, for 3 adults, 2 children at a restaurant, We never spent more than $40
Never.
for everybody to eat very good,
And
very
that's
well.
tax and tip included.
Yes.
When we were there, they had the NBA Finals, and Brandon and I went to a sports bar, a very nice sports bar. Every single time,
Craft cocktails,
yeah,
nice entrees, the works.
all under $40.
All under 40.
Right. You notice she said craft cocktails. We're not talking about the bottom shelf stuff, right? So as if we haven't, but I'm just saying. So people don't say, of course it's cheap if you know. But yeah, so that's the thing, right? We want you to know that that's the other, last but not least, that's the other important thing. You may say, well, Joe, I have no ambition of going back where I live. I'd much rather be someplace in Mexico. Well, that may mean for you that you can achieve your FIRE number faster because you may need a lesser amount. And so I think you should keep that in mind, because some people may calculate their FIRE number and say, oh my gosh, I can't stay in this job that long or stay in this city that long.
Right.
Well, if it's that serious, you can find other places and it's no problem. All right?
Nailing it.
All right, so check it out. What's the next one here?
What are some there we go. What are some creative ways to finance a month or year sabbatical?
Yep, so I did a video on that one as well. And I'll tell you this, right? Check the video out, but it's really just what you're saving for, right? Because I tell people all the time, a lot of financial services companies will criticize or make people feel bad because they're not saving what they should save for retirement. And I'm a big proponent for saving for retirement. Naturally, we're saving over 60%. However, I'm in the field, so I could see what it actually looked like on a day in and day out basis. Most people, don't know anyone who's retired. And if they do know someone who's retired, they're generally older and they may not be able to do all the things that they want to do. And, so when you look at that, you say, man, you're encouraging someone in their 20s to save 40 years for something that they've never seen play out, right? And you're asking them to push that off, right? Push off some purchases they're going to make today in order for them to retire later. And it normally doesn't register. So what I encourage people to do, if you're having trouble saving for retirement, don't worry about saving for retirement. Save for a sabbatical. And a sabbatical is normally 12-month period of time where you're saying, you know what, I'm just going to go and be. I'm going to go to Mexico for 12 months and I'll figure it out in month 10 or 9 as I'm getting closer to the end. And here's what I learned is that once you experience that feeling that most everyone never experienced before as an adult, which is the absolute total freedom over your time and everything else that you want to do, you will start finding creative ways in order to make sure you never go back to the work environment ever again. Right? You've been living for a year without a boss. You're not trying to go back to a boss.
That's right.
Right? You've been living in a tropical destination, kicking back, treating yourself for all the ways we talked about for under $30, $40. You're not trying to go back to the rat race. And that's my whole point. That sabbatical will give you the motivation to figure out the pathway forward for your financial freedom.
That's right. That's right. All right,
y'all.
All right,
we rolling, y'all. If you have questions, like Brandy said, put them in the comment section. We know it's early, but when we tell you where we are now, you understand why we're doing it so early, right? What factors go into choosing a destination? We talked about a few of them. Certainly safety, particularly for my wife and kids, right? I mean, obviously I care about my own safety, but it's different if I'm walking down the street versus if my wife is walking down the street. Yeah. And making sure she feels comfortable with the reaction that she gets and things of that nature, right?
Right. Safety, cost of living, cost of food, culture, right? Yeah. Culture. We like a very cultural rich place, very diverse.
Speaking of diversity, how we feel as Black people in another country, right? What is the reception that we're receiving? Because we, that's very important to us. I mean, this is a financial freedom, but also almost like a Black seat, right? Where we're like, yo, let's see what it feels like and how we're treated in other places around the world. right?
So food costs, cost of living,
Safety, proximity. Other weather,
weather,
right?
yes,
Because
weather.
one of the things when I was planning our trip is really I always look at the weather so that I know when is the perfect time for us to experience this place. Like when we were planning out Mazatlan, their rainy season begins in July, so we left just prior to July on purpose. And then other places like oftentimes people think, oh, I just choose a Caribbean destination. Well, that's nice, and I love the Caribbean like anyone else. But from June to November, most places is hurricane season.
Right.
So we're not trying to get to a destination and have to try to,
Take
experience the
shelter.
hurricane, take shelter,
shelter.
try to find a flight out. So
Yeah.
so
As much
again,
as best we can, right?
yeah. So we can't control everything, but there's certain things that we can try to influence.
That's right.
Right. So weather is one of them. Right. We want to go to a place, and that's why we camped out in Aruba for a while my as we prepare to really set sail, if you will, is because we knew that they're outside of the hurricane belt.
Right. Although they've had some real trippy weather this year.
Lately, yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
Global
We
warming.
thank God.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, how did you prepare your children for the move? Ooh-wee.
Anybody who knows my five-year-old, our 5-year-old, knows that you will check in with her first.
You will do it.
And you will let her know, and she wants all the information.
Satisfactory answers, by the way.
Yes. Where are we going? Why are we going there? I'll start. How do you just communication? Tell them everything. Why are we moving? Well, we're trying to explore. We want to go see what else is out there. But I'm gonna miss my stuff. Well, there's things that you'll find in other places that you find here. Some of the things that are important to our daughter is parks and pools and oceans and family time. We normally would have like family night on Friday nights.
Fridays, yeah.
But now we have family night, family days, family mornings all the time. So she's not missing out on much of the things that are nostalgic and important to her. We just transfer them from one place to the other. So communicating that ahead of time, not making it doom and gloom. And both of us had to be clear on our doom, make sure we don't have doom and gloom or hesitation or any kind of
make sure your heart
doubt.
is clean.
Right. That's that it doesn't transfer to them. So preparing them is just talking to them. If they're under 5, it's easier because they're not attached to a lot of schools and things like that, and everything's so early. And so I think by doing that, it gave us the best chance for success. And we've been successful so far.
Yeah, and I also think just making room, right? It's not just one big conversation. So yes, it's an ongoing conversation, right? Literally, how many times will she say, like, and you might have had a conversation prior, but that's okay because she's processing her feelings, right? Yes. And so we want to make sure that we're sensitive to that fact. And we may know, like, oh, I'm sure she's going to love it when she gets there. But she may not have, or your child may not have that same confidence because they don't have the lived experience that we do. So just remembering, like, oh, they're basing it upon their frame of reference, where we're basing it upon knowing our children as well as understanding our own worldly experience. So just give them time. That's all I say is make a lot of space to have as many conversations as needed to make them feel comfortable. Even when you're like, yo, this is the umpteenth time we're talking about it, that's cool. It's okay, because as long as they're talking, then that means there's room to kind of work it out.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what we're looking at there. We get the question about what is world schooling.
What is world schooling? Well, our 5-year-old currently is being world schooled, and world schooling is learning based on active learning. It's active learning, being engulfed in the environment and being able to be outdoors. It's similar to homeschooling, but we use the world as our canvas. We not only discuss subject matter in a book, but we actually go to the destination so she can actually put her hands and eyes and ears and all her 5 senses on that particular subject matter and really get engulfed in it. And we want to travel to different places so that she understands, like for instance, foreign language. We teach Spanish at home in Sandy Springs, but when we got to Mexico, we actually had to use the Spanish, and it was a different experience for her because now she's engulfed in the culture. She's having to apply what she knows, and so therefore it activated that learning immediately. It wasn't just stored in her brain for years without any use. She had to use it immediately. And life skills, world school is life skills. We're out teaching her in real time about how to be safe on the streets and take the bus and the train and things that she's going to use her whole life. But you're giving them real world experiences. You're teaching them in real time, and they're activating the knowledge immediately. It's not stored for, like I said, for months and months and months. You're putting them in the situation and grading them based on their response.
Yeah, and if you're thinking like, yeah, I do some of that now. We used to do that when we were working as well. However, at least for us, I think the difference is not being hurried in that process. Then that allows you to make a lot of different connections with what you've taught them in terms of book knowledge versus practical application of that information, right? So just a simple example, right? So let's say we took the Uber and Mazatlan, right? So she's surrounded by everyone who speaks Spanish. The Uber driver she's speaking Spanish to. Uber drivers in Mexico, by the way, prefer cash, right?
Pesos.
They will text you and let you know you better have cash because they don't deal with the credit, right? And then so she's watching us count it out, or we're talking her through, here's how much it'll be, this is how much you give them, here's how much change we're going to get back. And let's say we're going to the market. Well, now she's in the market and she's seeing like, okay, I want this apple. All right, well, how much is the apple in pesos? And what does that convert to in US money? And, paying the vendor, communicating with the vendor, all of these experiences pretty much form the connections to say, okay, you learn math, you learn language, you learn, how to speak, public speaking skills, all of that kind of stuff. So that's what we mean by world schooling, right? Like you said, you get to touch, taste, and feel everything versus it being in a more sterile environment where you're learning, close the book, lessons over, versus you're actually having that lived experience day in and day out.
True. And just remember, for the parents who are concerned about homeschooling while traveling abroad, I know in the state of Georgia, you just register your child through the state as a homeschooler, and they are good up until third grade. That's when they test out. But prior to third grade, you teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, and a slew of other subject matter. They should be good to go. There's no need to be overly concerned about socialization or anything like that, because while you're traveling, you could hire a tutor if you'd like to, expand upon certain subject matters. There's tons of camps and group activities that they can be involved in those particular locations. Like we're looking into classes and whatnot for our 5-year-old to do with her. So that should be fun. And then, of course, you have parks, you have recreation centers, you have libraries. There's in most cities, in most places that you'll visit, you'll find all the same things that you have at home. So you don't have to worry about education or socialization. It's just about you applying what you know. There's tons of workbooks and textbooks, and the internet and everything you can think of, websites and all kinds of things that we're happy to share with you at a later time, what we're doing. But just as just here in the beginning of all, while you're processing it in the beginning, don't fret, don't be nervous, don't be crazy in your mind. They'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think along with that is just essentially what Brandy is also saying is that you don't have to have everything down to a science, right? And you'll find as you're, reading blogs and reading newspapers, things of that nature, some stuff is more squishy than it is set in stone, right? So, for example, we still have our investment property in Georgia because we don't know where we're ultimately going to land, and we don't know what the rules are, particular when it's like if you don't have like if we sold our investment property and we were truly just roaming the globe with our child that's school age. I'm not sure who would take jurisdiction of that. So that's why we want to maintain that until we figure out what our ultimate destination might be. Couple of things. If you are, one of the other things people are, and that's what makes us unique in a lot of ways, is we've seen other families who are traveling. They normally have older kids or kids that are out of the household almost. And for us, we have an 8-month-old now and 5-year-old. So these are things to consider. But here's what I want you to know: it is possible, right? Because I've heard so many people say, if we didn't have kids, we would do this. Well, we are doing it, so we know it's possible, and we encourage you to again ask yourself, not can it be done, but how can we do it, right?
See how we say that together?
Yeah, I like that.
Let's do it again.
How? Right? So anyway, so that's what we're looking at there. How do you manage your assets, businesses in the U.S. while traveling? Well, I'll kick things off. Here's the funny part about things, right? Because not only do we get that question, but it's like, oh, you're just essentially, with all that time, are you bored, right? And it's like, no. You know what I think about is clients who used to tell me, Joe, the thing I'm surprised about is how busy I am in retirement, and I'm surprised that I even had time to work. And now I understood the statement then, but I really understand that statement now, right? Because the nice thing is we're not busy with work that somebody else has heaped upon us. This is stuff that we actually enjoy doing. So for example, we're homeschooling, and I was telling Brandy this the other day, is I used to get a kick out of watching shows like My Wife and Kids and others where the parents would be super creative in teaching their kids life lessons. Well, now we have the time to put together a treasure hunt for our daughter or to do, different things, but it takes time, right?
Yes.
So
And shout out to all the teachers.
Oh yeah,
my
big
God.
time.
Like, I love you. And I'm here
And
for you.
respect
In
you,
any
yeah.
way I can support the teachers. So God bless y'all, because teaching it's got to be a gift from God.
Yeah, we create our own lesson plan, so we feel you. So that's the nice thing. But in terms of how we manage the assets in the businesses,
You got an internet, you're in business.
You're
You
in
got
business.
internet, you're in business. So all of our businesses are run remotely. And a special heartwarming shout out to our manager.
yes,
It's important to have a tribe around your business that will, people who are going to be on the ground that hold the thing together. And so being that we travel remotely, I do have uh, a young lady who is just a superstar, and I have to dote on her a little bit, because without her this would be impossible, really.
True.
Because I'm very much a on the ground, boots on the ground kind of business owner. So it's important that you have that team. So as you're planning to work remotely, if you are running a brick and mortar or something where it's a more physical business, definitely have a solid team. So you're near a Corona, you know who you are. I love you. I thank you. And so just remember, have that solid team.
Yeah, and remember these are relationships that are years in the making, right? Making sure that I'm a believer that when you start a business, you should be trying to work your way out of the business anyways. Otherwise, you just bought yourself another job, right? So, and how you do that is by pouring into other people,
Yes.
right? So, and then hopefully it's reciprocated. Not always, but in like this case, very much so, right? So just keep at it. Again, the question is not can you do it, it's how can you do it?
At the same time,
How
baby.
can you do it? We did.
No.
How can you do it? I don't like that. Let's keep moving.
All right.
So, what was Mazatlan like? Oh man. All right. So it was, first off, it's awesome. It's speechless. It's amazing. It's so I like the fact that from a number standpoint, I mean, you got a lot of bang for your buck, and none of it felt second rate. I mean, we went to, we had floor seats at the local basketball game.
Professional basketball game.
Yep, and that was like $10 a person.
That's right.
We had balcony seats at the ballet, $10 a person.
Yeah.
Right? We ate well. We had plenty of entertainment. As you saw in the video, I mean, we were like parasailing with my little one. I mean, swam every day at the beach.
In our, I don't think we showed this in the video, but
Yeah.
one of our Airbnbs had an actual
Swimming pool.
that overlooked the ocean,
Yes.
you know, the skyline and the ocean. So these beautiful views of the city that we didn't have to pay extreme amounts of money for. So.
Yeah, that was good. And then we love the family vibe, right? And it's not just if you have a family, but give you an example. They have a Malecon that's like, you know, miles and miles long along the ocean front, and everyone congregates there at nighttime, and they have restaurants and bars and everything. And at least all the cities we've been in and visited, and both Brandy and I have traveled extensively in the United States, is that normally it's like once the lights come on right at night, the kids go home and the adults go out. And it's not like that in Mexico, at least not in Mazatlan, right? Where it could be 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and you'll see entire families from babies to grandparents and everything in between hanging out. And not just hanging out, I'm talking about partying, right? I mean, they're eating good, they're laughing, the music's playing. They'd load into a car or a
They
pickup.
have live bands.
Yeah, live bands. They'll load up into a pickup truck and got the music going. And I'm telling you, it's a whole vibe, right? And we actually appreciated that because, you know, it inspired us to bring our daughter out with us when we were watching the game at the sports bar, hanging out, and no one gave you, you know, stares of judgment or you know, or any of that. It's because I like that, because otherwise your kids grow up thinking that it's something beyond the darkness, right? And they can't wait until they're teenagers to go hang out and party. And it's like, if you grow up in that environment, you're like, that's nothing new. I've been doing that since birth.
Right.
You know,
so Mazatlan, you know, Mazatlan has a piece of my heart, honey. It was a great introduction into our fire journey. It was family friendly. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And for those who have never heard of Mazatlan and don't know where it is on the map, you see Cabo San Lucas, which most people know. They're in the California Baja Peninsula. Just go parallel across on the I'm sorry,
that's okay. It's Mexico, like the mainland
side of Mexico. You'll see it right there. And if you think about that, they share both the same body of water, but the costs are just completely different. So if you're thinking about going to Cabo, maybe consider Mazatlan. You'll get more bang for your buck. You can stay there for an extended period of time and get the same beautiful water, the same scenery, same activities. It's gorgeous.
And you better get there fast, because the secret is getting out. I mean, there were high rise after high rise after high rise.
We counted like 20 development high rises along the Malecon. So yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So drum roll, please. Where are we headed next? Well, it's not where we're headed. It's where we're at.
Where are we?
All right. So we are in Portugal. To be specific, we are in Lisbon. Right. So our trajectory is that we wanted to make sure that, well, we heard beautiful, wonderful things about Portugal. And because we slow travel the world, we wanted to not only come to the big city, but we wanted to say, okay, let's spend a month in Lisbon, and then a month in Portugal, and then a month in the Porto, and then the Algarve regions. Right. So it's essentially the center, and then the other coast, and the other coast, right? So in hopes of figuring out which one is our vibe, and so far Lisbon is awesome.
Is slapping, y'all.
Yeah, but we're not
huge. We'll say.
I was gonna say we're not gonna give away too much.
We'll just say it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And we're enjoying ourselves.
Yes, we are. So more to come. More to come on that, right? So again, Brandon and I realized this early, but like I was saying, the reason why we're starting off at 7 in the morning, because we're 5 hours ahead. So it's noontime, right? So think about this. If normally we do, I go live around 6 o'clock. Well, that would be 11 p.m. our time, right? So we're just trying to adjust our lives and videos to our life here, right? We're 5 hours ahead Eastern Standard Time. So for us, it's about 1 o'clock, right? For you, it's almost 8 o'clock. So That's why we have this video available for replay, right? So if you have questions and answers, things of that questions that you have, we will provide answers.
Let me just double check, make sure we don't have any questions.
Oh, how about that?
So that before we skedaddle.
Yep, we don't always see them coming through, y'all. So that's a great point. Well, as Brandy's looking that up, let me just remind you, if you found this information to be helpful, please like, subscribe, and share so that the YouTube algorithm can share this information far and wide. Because again, the whole point of doing this, right, to take time from our schedule to share with you all is just to make sure as many people benefit from it as possible. That's really the charge and the mission, is just saying, how many people can we expose to this lifestyle of FIRE? So then that way you can decide which path you want to take, the traditional path to retirement or the accelerated path to retirement in terms of FIRE. But whatever you decide, you can never say that you weren't exposed to FIRE. That's our calling, is to say we want people to know this thing exists.
That's right.
Right.
It looks like we're good to go.
All right.
And we thank you guys for sending your questions ahead of time. Hopefully you were able to find some of this to be helpful. We plan to share as much as we can moving forward. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. This has been fun. Yeah, how about that? All right, y'all. So as I always say, until next time, be good to yourselves, and we'll see you again soon.
Be good to yourself and be good to your spouse.
That's right.